So my plan this evening was just to kind of go through what Pope Francis wrote about this Year of Mercy in the letter that he wrote to kind of introduce it to the world. It's got a wonderful name. It's called a Bull of Indiction. That's what we just call the letter to introduce it. It's called Misericordiae Vultus, just the face of mercy. Okay, that's what that means. And so he starts out basically by saying that Jesus Christ is the face of the mercy of the Father. So, everything that the Year of Mercy is, everything that Jesus is and who the Father is, we can really and truly sum up in mercy. And that's the first point that he makes. That's everything about Jesus is to show the face of the Father's mercy. So that's his mission. That continues to be his mission. That's what he did in all the different things that he was trying to do, up until his death and resurrection, and even continuing now. It's Jesus Christ, the face of the mercy of God. So, on one hand, we celebrate mercy just because we're Christians. There isn't, everything about being Christian is about mercy. But he says we constantly need to contemplate mercy. We need to sit with it. We need to kind of let it seep in. It's one of those things that we kind of learn more by just being in the presence of it than anything else. It's not like we can really go to a talk, as wonderful as this one will be. You can't really go to a talk and find out about mercy. You experience mercy, then you know what it is. You know mercy because someone is merciful to you. But for us Christians, we know mercy because God has been merciful to us. That's Jesus' mission. The death and resurrection of Christ is what it was that God said, I love you anyway. Despite all sins, despite everything else, we will transform all of that. I will transform all of that so that it becomes something that gives life. There's a wonderful preface that we say during ordinary time. And I'm going to forget it right now because I don't have it in front of me. But it's, you came to our aid by your power, by your divinity, but you wanted us to be saved by one like ourselves. So in Christ, the cause of our downfall has become the means of our salvation. Wasn't that an amazing thing? That's the mercy of God. That the cause of our downfall, the very thing that made us, separated us from God, has become now the means of our salvation. Now that's an incredible transformation that comes about because of the mercy of God. That's what it is that we're about. Trying to experience that during this year in deeper and ever deeper ways, to experience that ourselves so that we are going to be able to then show it to other people. Because the reality is that the way that we know God's mercy is because we know the mercy of other people. Because other folks have been merciful to us. Because people have forgiven us. Because people have let slide our own difficulties and faux pas and mistakes. And they said, okay, try again. And they've been merciful to us, and so we know mercy. And it's that we are invited to be in the world. To be ambassadors bridge that connects God to us, that opens our hearts to the hope of being loved forever despite our sinfulness. That's what the mercy of God is about, and that's what we are invited into. That's what we are invited to be. So, during this whole year, we're invited into that and sit in the midst of mercy and let it sort of percolate into us and be aware that all around us, that mercy of God surrounds us. Now, can you think of a time in the history of the world, well, there are probably various times, but in recent history of the world, when there's been a greater need for mercy? But Lord, there was another mass shooting today in San Bernardino, California. So, I mean, where do we find mercy to respond to those kinds of events? That's what this year is. That's what I think Pope Francis hopes this year will enable us to do. To find within ourselves a way that we can respond to the violence of the world with mercy. There's a great, one of the books that is great, it's worth reading, is Ronald Rolheiser, a priest. He's a oblate of Mary Magdalene. And he wrote a book called Sacred Fire. And in there he's got a chapter dedicated to Mary. And what it talks about is Mary and the image of Mary as the one who pondered the Word of God. Over and over again, especially in Luke, Mary took all these things into her heart and pondered them. The angel comes, and Mary pondered what this greeting could mean. The wise men show up, as Matthew already was, and Mary pondered what this could mean. She goes to Simeon. Simeon tells her that the Son is wonderful and great, and she pondered what this could mean. And it's that pondering of Mary that he picks up on. And he talks about it as Mary taking in these things and transforming them and then giving them back. The height of that being Mary at the foot of the cross. Mary who sees this terrible violence done to her Son, who sees that and takes it all in. And she ponders it. What does this mean? What is this about? And she holds on to it until she can give back love for violence. So she holds all that violence inside of her until God can transform it to love. And then she gives it back. And it's that giving back love for violence. That's, I think, perhaps one of the signature things that we're invited to do. So there's a bunch of different aspects to a holy year. There's this thing called a holy door. And the holy door is in Rome. It's in St. Peter's, and it's normally bricked out. Every 25 years they unbrick it. Unless there's an extraordinary Jubilee year. There's an ordinary Jubilee year every 25 years. And it just, it's, the last ordinary Jubilee was in 2000. And you might have remembered how it led up to that. We had the year of the Father, and the year of the Son, and the year of the Holy Spirit. And then we had this Jubilee year of 2000, the new millennium. But there are often, for one reason or another, the Pope will decide to have an extraordinary Jubilee year for something or another. This is one of those extraordinary years, because this isn't 2025. When the next scheduled one is supposed to come around. So, this extraordinary Jubilee, and so they unbrick the holy door, and it's an entrance for pilgrims. pilgrimage is a big part of what a Holy Year is about. And it used to be just a pilgrimage to Rome. And so you went to Rome and you walked through the Holy Door. And that was kind of the arrival at the spot that you were looking for, that you had made your pilgrimage to. What the Pope says is it's really unrealistic. The people of Buenos Aires are too poor to get over to Rome, most of them. The people of Tanzania are too poor to get over to Rome, most of them. The people of Loveland, Colorado are too poor to get over to Rome, most of them. So let's make this a little bit more accessible. Pilgrimage is still a big piece of this, but let's make the pilgrimage reachable. And let's make it so that people can actually do this, so they'll participate a little bit more into it. And so he started by saying every cathedral in every diocese can have a holy door, a place of pilgrimage, a place of entrance for pilgrims. So, Immaculate Conception Cathedral, downtown Denver, is a place of pilgrimage, where one can make a pilgrimage to our cathedral and fulfill that pilgrimage aspect of a jubilee. So, but then he went a little bit further and he said, but even at that, sometimes it's really hard to get, if you're especially in the outskirts, to get into the center of the city or wherever of the diocese where the cathedral is. So bishops, think about some other places that would be significant churches in outlying areas where people could go to make that pilgrimage. And so there are 4 of them. Might be 5. Mother Cabrera Shrine is one. St. Stephen's in Glenwood Springs is one. Out in Sterling, St. Anthony's is one. And Our Lady of Guadalupe Church in Denver is one. I picked those because they are kind of the major churches in those areas, kind of centrally located on the Eastern Plains on the western slope for the Spanish speakers of the diocese. So, sorry, there's only 4. So that's where, if you want to make a pilgrimage, you can go to Mother Cabrera Shrine. If you want to make a pilgrimage, you can go to St. Stephen's in Glenwood Springs. Take the train. If you want to make a pilgrimage, you can go to St. Anthony's in Sterling. You probably can't take a train up there. Go wagon train. So there's all sorts of places that you can go. Now, the idea isn't just to kind of go there and walk through the door. The pilgrimage is a very specific kind of, prayer. Okay, pilgrimages are not meant to be easy. Okay, that doesn't mean that they have to be hard, but there's some degree of sacrifice that happens in a pilgrimage, and the sacrifice and the problems that you encounter are just a part of it. In other words, if you get done in your car to drive down to Denver and you end up with a flat tire, the flat tire in and of itself is part of the prayer. It's overcoming those obstacles to get there. And it's going to a place as a place that you go to find something that you find up here, but maybe because of the effort you put into it, it's a little, you can see it a little bit better, see it a little bit clearer. You're a little bit more open to it, okay? And if St. John's was declared a pilgrimage site, we would probably make this door over here a holy door. Now, how many of you have ever walked through that door over there? A ton of you walked through that door. So all of a sudden it's a holy door. Look at it different. Now, in Rome, they keep it worked out so that it is something special, but all the other places, it's just another door. And somebody walks through that door, and it's like, just a door, what does this mean? And yet, it's the fact that this is the place that I've been coming to so that I can find the mercy of God, so that I can know more deeply the mercy of God. Now, before you make the pilgrimage, there's some preparation. The preparation has to do with confession and communion, right? So, now that doesn't mean that, okay, I'm going on pilgrimage today, so this morning I have to come to confession and Mass, and then I'll get in the car and drive down to Denver or over to Loveland Springs or wherever I'm going. No, it's not that at all. What it means is that sometime, during this year, confession and Mass and pilgrimage are all of a piece. That there's a connection. You see the connection between those three things. Okay? That I go to confession to receive the mercy of God. I go to communion. I receive the mercy of God in the body and blood of Christ. And I make this pilgrimage, and I see the mercy of God in a new way as I walk through this holy door. And when that happens, because of all those things, because of the prayer and the pilgrimage and the confession and the communion, something happens, something spiritual happens. Call it an indulgence. Now, how many of you remember indulgences? Okay, so many days off of purgatory, right? Now, you're going to get these things also going through in the pastor's corner. So this one is about pilgrimage, or is about indulgence for this Sunday. It's supposed to be last Sunday, but you got two of the same. So anyway, so it's about indulgence. Now, you probably remember indulgence as so many days off of purgatory. You say a particular prayer in a particular place, and you get 14 days off of purgatory. Or, if you did some big deal, you got a year or two off of purgatory, right? What does that mean? When we're talking about purgatory, we're talking about something that's outside of time. So days and years and months, they really don't mean anything. Plus, we have this idea that purgatory as a place of punishment, right? We're getting punished by the Lord, and it's sort of it's the big time out in the sky, right, before you can get into heaven, right? But think about this for a second. If you're in purgatory, you're on your way. You know you're going to get there. The doubt is gone. So it's a place of happiness. It's like, yeah, I can do all this stuff because I know I'm going to get there. The light is at the end of the tunnel. The light is all around you. So purgatory is this place. Purgatory started out because there was this thought that we have all of these saints, and these saints have done amazing things, and they have this store of grace that, because they're saints and they're now in heaven, they don't need. So it's kind of like the talk about is the economy of salvation, so that the grace is not wasted; it's shared, and we can participate in the grace of the saints by certain holy acts. Now, that got a bad rap, a really bad rap, in the days when they were building the cathedrals, because what they would do, they were raising money, And so people who were pretty poor would come to give money. They would give because they wanted to help support, Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. And so they would give whatever little bit they had. And that was a real sacrifice. That was an act, that was a spiritual action that they were doing. And so the church said, that is worthy of indulgence. Now, it got all twisted around, and unsavory characters went around saying, you can buy indulgences, right? Give me $30 and you can have a 5-year indulgence. So 5 years off purgatory for $30. And so it became, an abuse that was serious enough that part of the cause of the Reformation, right? But the idea wasn't that you're selling the indulgence. The idea was that someone is of their own free will coming to give a gift to build this great cathedral, and they are giving a bit of money that they have at great sacrifice. And that's worth something. That's a deeply spiritual act, to trust God that much. So, what is indulgence? Holiness isn't something that we do. Holiness is something that God does. Grace is not a quantity. It's not that I have more grace or less grace. Not like I'm full of grace and then I kind of walk away and then I have a hole someplace and it kind of leaks out. The hole of sin, right? And it kind of leaks out. That's not what grace is. Grace is, to put it simply, the grace is the love of God for us. God's love for us. That is overwhelming and immense and eternal and everlasting. That's what grace is. And it surrounds us and it's with us always. We always walk surrounded by grace. So the issue isn't whether or not God is giving grace. God loves us. God is always in love with us. The issue is ourselves. Because we sometimes don't recognize it. That's what sin is. Sin's closing our eyes to that. And it's closing our eyes to the goodness of God, to the love of God that's right in front of me, so that I can do something and instead do something else that I think is going to be better or more fun or whatever, bigger reward, whatever it might be. And so sin isn't so much that grace leaks out, it's just that I ignore it. And so mercy comes then as opening one's eyes. And if you've ever really experienced a depth of mercy, a depth of forgiveness from somebody, that opens your eyes. It's like, wow, how can that person do that? I mean, you can be a real cat and say, well, great, we have a chance. Most of us, however, when we receive that mercy, it changes us. It opens our eyes, and we can begin to see that love around us. That's what pilgrimage does. That's kind of what indulgence is. Mercy is an indulgent thing, right? It's what allows us to open our eyes, to recognize goodness around us. Pope Francis talks about indulgence as removing the residue. You know how you wash a window, you get that residue on there, and you kind of got to go over it again. It's clean, you can see through it, but it's got that wax waxy yellow buildup. And so you gotta strip that off, or you gotta take that off somehow. There's that same kind of thing. There's a consequence that remains for sin, right? And it's that indulgence takes away, that indulgence removes. It's, again, in the mercy of God, indulgence is what God is about. And so, if I lie to somebody, if I lie to Marge might forgive me, but there's still that harmed relationship. And so there's that little bit of doubt that's there all the time now. And so it's a little bit of a decision now that Marge has got to make. Am I going to trust him this time? Am I going to trust him on that? And it's that residue of sin that gets taken away. Okay, that's what indulgence is about. It's not so much that we get, it's not like time off for good behavior. And it's not, grace is not some kind of spiritual credit union. It's just simply the love of God. Indulgence, and it's not a magical thing. Okay, so I go to confession, I go to communion, and I walk down to the cathedral or wherever I go, and walk through the door, and got my plenary indulgence, I'm all set to go. No, there is a disposition, right? God knows our hearts. Really, you kind of walk in flippantly saying, man, you do all these things like you can control God. Really? And so God who knows our hearts knows what's going on. And so the very things that we do, prayer, confession, communion, pilgrimage, the desire to walk through that holy door, the desire to know mercy in a deeper way. All those things open us up. All those things open us up, and then we can see more clearly. Then we can recognize God's mercy, God's grace, God's goodness. The waxy yellow buildup gets stripped away. So that's what indulgence is about. So those are the four things that go into a holy year. Those are the four big actions that you partake. Now, we can get a little bit silly about it. So, for instance, these are the calendar of all the things going on for the Jubilee year. So, on December 13th, on December 8th, the Pope opens the Holy Door in Rome, at St. Peter's. On December 13th, they open in other places around the world. So, the Holy Door opens at the Cathedral, at Mother Capri Shrine, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Denver, St. Stephen's, Loveland Springs, St. Anthony's, and Sterling. And we have a pilgrim postcard program. Postcards will be available for pilgrims to collect stamps from each of the 5 designated Holy Door sites. Now, it can seem a little bit silly, but it's meant to be a way to kind of entice, engage people in this whole pilgrimage thing. Shoot, for us here, it's probably easier to go up to Wyoming. We can go to St. Mary's Cathedral, and that might be more of a pilgrimage for us, right? Than going down to Denver. So, what is it that we're looking for? What is it that we're hoping to find? What is this mercy about? It's about It's about how it is that we look at everything in the world. What do we look at? Pope Francis points to his own motto. His motto is Miserando adque eligendo, which means miserando adque, to look with mercy, eligiendo, choosing. Okay, so look first with mercy and then choose. Now that comes from a reflection that was given on anybody been to Rome and seen that Caravaggio about the Call of Matthew? And it's someplace you gotta go and you gotta keep feeding euro coins into this light that goes on for a minute or two, so you can see it to really look at it. But it really is. I mean, you see a lot. It's one where Jesus is pointing through the door at Matthew, and Matthew is sitting at the table with all the his tax collector friends, and nobody's paying attention to Jesus except Matthew. And Jesus is looking at Matthew and pointing his finger at him, and Matthew's kind of going. And Caravaggio is all about light, right? So there's this beam of light that comes from Jesus to Matthew. Everything else is dark except the beam of light, Matthew, Jesus, and light. So there was a fly in my windows. And so Bishop Bergoglio, or Our Father Bergoglio, was at a conference or read a commentary or something on that picture and on the Call of Matthew. And the author used that phrase that Jesus looked at Matthew with mercy, and then he chose it. And so out of that came, look with mercy and then choose. And so what does that mean for us? How do we, it means you look at the world, everything, and how do you respond to things that are going on? To look first with mercy. To see everything first with eyes of mercy. To give that merciful glance. And then, after you've looked with mercy, then decide how you're going to act. Okay? But how do we look at things most of the time? How do you look at the shooting in Planned Parenthood? We look at that with criticism, right? One way or the other. We look at that with what could have been done better, and what can we change for next time so that this doesn't happen again. We're probably looking at this shooting in San Bernardino in the same way. Oh, for heaven's sakes, not again! How in the world could this happen? What's wrong with us? And so we look with critique. We look with condemnation. And Jesus says, no. Or Pope Francis says, no, look with mercy. That's the first thing you got to do. And until you can look with mercy, our choices really aren't very good. They don't measure up to God because they're not merciful. They don't come out of a place of mercy. They come out of someplace else. Judgment or critique or criticism. So that's the big thing, is that looking with mercy, to look at everything first with the eyes of mercy. Now, that's a pretty incredible thing to ask of us. How in the world do we look with eyes of mercy? And what does that mean? What does that mean to look at a horrible, terrible tragedy with the eyes of mercy? back to that image of Mary, who took these things and pondered them and transformed them to give back love for violence. That, I think, is what he's kind of getting at. To look with mercy, we have to go through that process. We have to be able to somehow or another take in the violence, change it within us. Or actually, we don't change it. God changes it. But allow God to transform it so that what we give back isn't more violence for violence, but we can give back love for violence. Then we can act because we've looked with mercy. And it says it's going to be easy. But I think what Francis says is, do you remember there's a line in one of the Harry Potter movies, and I think it's Dumbledore says, we will very shortly have to face the choice between what is easy and what is right. And I don't think that, wait a minute, is that a choice? And I think that that's kind of part of what the Pope is getting at, is that it's not easy, but it's the right thing to do. And so let's do the right thing rather than the easy thing. And sometimes the right thing might be easy. Most of the time it's not going to be. So, now we have a long tradition of mercy in the church. We have a long tradition that we named, right? We have the corporal and the spiritual works of mercy. Right? And so he says, it is my burning desire that during this Jubilee, the Christian people reflect on the corporal and spiritual works of mercy. It will be a way to reawaken our conscience, too often grown dull in the face of poverty, and let us enter more deeply into the heart of the gospel, where the poor have a special experience of God's mercy. So, it's the corporal works of mercy. I get everyone to know this, but I always have to, so it's easier to read. Feed the hungry, drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, welcome the stranger, heal the sick, visit the imprisoned, bury the dead. Do I know where those come from? Jesus, the end, the king will come on clouds, and will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left, and he will say to those on his right, come, you who entered into the kingdom of my Father, for I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me. He doesn't say I was dead and buried me. Probably could have. When did we see you hungry or thirsty or naked or sick or in prison and tend to you? As long as you did it to one of the very least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. That's where those come from. You know, that's, in a sense, that's what we're judged on. There's a scary thought. We're judged on our mercy. So they will let this year coming up. The spiritual works of mercy counsel the doubtful, instruct the ignorant, admonish sinners, comfort the afflicted, forgive offenses, bear patiently those who do us ill, pray for the living and the dead. Now, spiritual works of mercy can be, if we're not careful, a little heavy-handed, right? Counsel the doubtful. What's wrong with you? Come here right now and get doubts. You know better than that. It's a little high-handed, right? Instruct the ignorant. How many times have I told you? So those are, kind of things not to do, right? Admonish the sinners. No. That's not admonishing sinners. That's not looking first for mercy, right? That's looking for judgment. But it does say, let's look at what you're doing. Let's take a look and see how it's affecting you. And let's see what it's doing to all these people around you. The kind of conversation you have with someone that you love, that you see heading down the wrong road. How many of you have tried to have those conversations with your children? Yeah, hard. Really hard. A lot of times, the receptive, they're not very receptive. But it's that kind of conversation that's born out of love. Okay? Comfort the afflicted. Now there's an amazing thing. We did this morning, March and family. To bear patience, to forgive offenses. Goes right with the next one. Bear patiently those who do us ill. Now, I'm not very good at that. Pray for the living and the dead. So all those things, none of those things are easy. But they're what we're invited into to reflect on. What is it? How does my life, how do I do these things in my life? How is it that my life is about these works of mercy, corporal and spiritual? What does it mean for me to be a merciful person? To look first with mercy, and then act, and then choose. There's a couple of other things that the Pope has going on that are somewhat novel. He's got this initiative that he's calling 24 Hours of Mercy. 24 Hours with the Lord. It's celebrated on the Friday and Saturday that precede the fourth Sunday of Lent. Fourth Sunday of Lent is Laudate or Gaudete, I can't remember. Laudate, thank you. It's the Rose Sunday of Lent, right? Where the priests get all embarrassed because we have to wear pink, right? And it's that time when, it's that little bit of joy in the midst of the penance of Lent, the heavy penitential message of Lent, and then remember why we're doing this. We're doing this to prepare to celebrate the death and resurrection of Christ. So, and it's happening all over the place. In every diocese, there'll be more stuff coming out as we get closer. But it's basically he wants many people, especially young people, to return to the sacrament of reconciliation. And so that's what this thing is about. Through this experience, they rediscover a path back to the Lord, live in a moment of intense prayer and finding meaning in lives. So let us place the sacrament of reconciliation at the center once more in such a way that it will enable people to touch the grandeur of God's mercy with their own hands. For every penitent will be a source of true interior peace. And he goes back to one of his favorite topics, which is reminding clergy of who they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to act, because we forget sometimes. I will never tire of insisting that confessors be authentic signs of the Father's mercy. It means when you come to confession and you hear, "You did what?" That's when you can say, "Father, I don't think you're an authentic sign." He's also sending out, so this 24 hours for the Lord is basically a worldwide day of prayer and penance, okay, all over the place. So probably Father John and I will be sitting in the confessional most of the day, I suspect. And I'm not exactly sure what it will mean, but it's kind of like that we'll leave the light on for you, the light is on for you, what we've done in the last few years, which is basically one evening when everybody knows they can go to any church and there will be priests there on a very particular time frame to the confession. Well, I suspect it will be something like that. So that's what that one's about. He's also sending out missionaries of mercy. These are, it doesn't sound like a big deal in the United States. Special confessors that have been given the faculty by the Pope to forgive any sin, even sins that are reserved to the Holy See. And I'm not exactly sure what those are, but and they'll be going, and so there's a bunch of priests who, I don't know if anybody from Denver has gone, but there's priests who've gone over Rome and they've received special kind of training. And they'll go back to Rome, and they kind of a crash course in mercy. And then they will be sent out from Rome back to their diocese and to other places of the world to bring this message of mercy through preaching, through confession, through sacrament of reconciliation. Now again, here in the United States, we may not think that's such a big deal, but boy, it could be a really big deal in some out-of-the-way places. Down in Colombia, for example, where, up here, we all have, us priests are given the faculty to forgive abortion, okay? That's a special faculty because that's normally reserved only to the bishop. Okay, so some places in the world, someone's had an abortion, comes in and says they had an abortion. The priest says, "I'm sorry, I have to talk to the bishop." So if you're out in the boondocks, you got to make a special trip all the way into the big city, find the bishop, and ask him to hear your confession. Now, how many people think they're going to do that? So it's a big deal to have these priests to go around. It's a big deal for the Pope to say, during this year of mercy, everybody can forgive the sin of abortion. Worldwide, it's a big deal. So sometimes because we're used to these things because the bishops have already given that faculty to most bishops. We don't think a whole lot of it, but in other places it's pretty big. He extends a call to mercy, and he wants to make that as easy as possible for the poor of the world to access. Okay? He wants people to be able to access those points of mercy, those places of pilgrimage, those ways of participating and receiving the love, the mercy, the forgiveness of God. We need to make this as easy as possible. That's what the clergy are for. Clergy are supposed to go to those far-flung areas to do that, rather than sitting in their comfy confessions. It's easy to sit in comfy confession. Someone comes in and screams, you did what? But to go far away, it's a little harder. And he wants that message of mercy to reach to some very specific places. May no one be indifferent to the call to experience mercy. I direct this invitation to conversion even more fervently to those whose behavior distances themselves from the grace of God. I particularly have in mind men and women belonging to criminal organizations of any kind. So it's going after organized crime, right? It's going after Cosa Nostra, and the Mexican mafia, and the drug cartels. You know, those are the people that he's saying, come back. Let go of this stuff. Come back. Will anybody listen? Who knows? But the invitation is there. The same, he's got some great lines in there. He says, do not fall into the terrible trap of thinking that life depends on money. And that in comparison with money, everything else is devoid of value or dignity. This is nothing but an illusion. You cannot take money into the life beyond. So, he gets some pretty good lines in. The same invitation is extended to those who either perpetrate or participate in corruption. A festering wound, a grave sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance, because it threatens the foundations of personal and social life. So he's hoping that this call to mercy is something that really does go out, you know, to everywhere, and to the people who most need to see it, who hear it, who generally are not the poor. The poor of the world, the people who struggle, generally have a sense of mercy in their life. It comes because, oh, I got another day to live. Oh, I got another meal. And they experience that mercy of God in those things. It's the rich, especially the super rich, that often miss mercy in their life. When you got everything, what do you need God for, right? My money does everything. My position does everything. My power does everything. So that's why he especially makes that appeal to people of wealth, of corrupt wealth, you know, either in criminal organizations or who participate in corruption. He talks about the relationship between justice and mercy. That they're not two different things, but they're two sides to the same coin, if you will. They're two faces of the same reality. That God's justice is mercy. That, and for God to judge is to be merciful. So, again, we often get it wrong. We think about God the judge, you know, who's sitting up there keeping tally. So we're so good. And, you know, keeps tally about all that stuff. And then the end of the world comes and he says, so, Ursula, remember on that day in 2015, December 2nd, I think it was, when you made that snide remark to the priest, remember that? What do you got to say for yourself? You know, we think about the final judgment that way, right? No, final judgment, the justice of God, is mercy. Mercy to those who want it. this whole year is about that. To come back around to where we started. That everything is about the love of God that surrounds us. And this year is given us as a way for us to participate in different kinds of activities that hopefully will open our hearts, open the eyes of our hearts, our souls, so that we can recognize that and see that love of God that surrounds us, and just simply allow God to love and to care for us. And in that love and out of that love and care, reach out to other people in the same way. That's what mercy is about. That's what we're invited into during this year. So, any questions?
If you go on the pilgrimage, how do you know you're going to get into church?
It's a good question. If you go on pilgrimage, how do you know you're going to get into church?
Because a lot of churches, they lost, like we do here.
I suspect that those churches have made special arrangements so that they are open for pilgrims and will have whatever kind of security measures they need.
Just have times, certain times.
Well, I expect they'll be open the whole time. Maybe not 24 hours, but from 6 to 10 or something like that. 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I don't know what they'll do. But I know that it's the holy year of 2000. And, midnight of, it started January 1st and ended January 31st of 2000. And there was still January 12 p.m. arrived on January 1st, 12 a.m. I mean. And there was still a long line of people waiting to go through the Holy Door. And Pope John Paul just simply said, keep it open till they all get through. So I suspect that that's the attitude that everybody will have. If you arrive at 2:30 in the morning, you may find the door locked. But I suspect that if you get there at reasonable times, that it'll be open. Right. Yes.
Father, I have a wonderful talk. I have a comment I just found out today talking about somebody that practiced mercy. And maybe some of you know this and I'm behind the power curve, but this weekend, I think Friday, there's a movie about Mother Teresa's life called The Letters that's going to start playing in this area. And I saw a trailer for it today. Looks excellent. About her life and her starting the order and how she got to caring for the poor, and about the many years of the dark night of the soul that she had experienced. So if you're looking for a good movie this weekend, you might check that out. It's called The Letters. And it's letters that she wrote to her priest-spiritual advisor over many years. But it's made in movie format. So.
In case you're interested about the life of Mother Teresa, called Letters. It's supposed to be quite good, throughout the meeting. Thanks for coming.